And welcome back, everybody, to Double Down with Breslo, where we cover everything in the business of sports betting. And when we talk about the business of sports betting, one of the probably larger areas or segments of sports betting are sports handicappers or touts or sharps. And we had one on the show before, and we've got him on again because I promised my audience that we were going to follow his picks throughout the season. And week one is under our belt in the NFL. So let's check back in with Richard Frazier of Frazier Wins, FRAZWINS.com. Richard, welcome back to the show.
Thank you very much, Jim. Glad to be here.
So this is going to be one of my most fun episodes because I'm a longtime sports bettor. I've used handicappers on and off, but I've never had the opportunity to talk to the handicapper after the week, especially after the handicapper had a losing weekend and I get to confront him and give him a rash of shit.
That's
so
fine.
and I also want to tell my audience I give Richard a ton of credit because he went 1-2 this weekend. Richard only gives out 3 picks a week, and we'll get into that. But he went 1-2, and I asked Richard. I said, "Look, are you sure you want to be on the show? We can wait until a week when you have a winning week, and so we can talk about your winning weekend." And to your credit, you said, "No, Jim, I'm coming on Tuesday." Even though I went 1-2, so I give you major kudos for that, my friend.
Thank you.
So let's talk about your 3 picks. And, this show is not normally about, who to bet on and who to pick and so on. But I do think having this discussion with a handicapper, considering it's such a significant part of the sports betting industry, I think is perfectly relevant to our show and to go through what goes on in making these picks and then how a handicapper, deals with looking back at a losing weekend. So you had 3 picks. You went 1-2. Let's talk about each one of them real quickly. You had it was Pittsburgh against San Francisco, right?
That's correct.
And Pittsburgh was an underdog by how many points?
Pittsburgh was a 2-point dog.
2-point dog. So we were getting 2 points to take Pittsburgh, but Pittsburgh lost not by 2 points. They lost by 23 points, 30-7. So you were way off on that one. How could you be so far off considering the level of genius that we're speaking with here?
Well, first off, I want to say, and I mentioned this to you before, that these picks are system generated. So it's not me going through all kind of football related data and coming up with these picks. The system makes the picks. After the fact, I can look at these games and say, well, I like this about it, I like that about it, but I don't like this about it. And that's all hindsight. But yeah, I can look at that game. And first off, I got called out for being a homer on that game, being that I'm originally from Pittsburgh.
But that's not true because this was algorithm generated.
That's correct. But what I was telling people prior to that game is being that I do root for the Steelers, I didn't like the fact that the Steelers had done so well in the preseason. I understand when the first team's out there for the first drive or two of a preseason game, you want them to do well, but inevitably I want the game to flip at some point. But that didn't happen in the Steelers' case. They won all 3 of their preseason games, and I think they gave the Pittsburgh people and people that support the Steelers a false sense of hope that this team was much better than it was. Again, nothing to do with the algorithm or the program, but that's my hindsight on that game. By the same token, you could say the opposite about San Francisco. You got Brock Purdy. Is he 100% healthy? They had a couple defensive issues, whether it was an injury or a holdout. But yeah, I don't think, looking back on it, that we really got the value in the point spread with Pittsburgh that we should have. And
that it wasn't even close, so we can't complain about the point spread.
No, that didn't make a difference, but it was just a bad pick. And
so tell us, and I apologize, maybe we covered this a bit on the prior show, but I forget. What can you share with us about the algorithm?
Well, the thing is that it's all historical point spread data. So our weakness going into week one is the fact that we have nothing but historical data to analyze. I call it a self-correcting system because as we get into the current season, we have more current season data that goes into the program and figured into it all.
So, in other words, you're comparing these teams from prior seasons and these scenarios to prior seasons and whether they covered or not, and et cetera, and all
Yes.
playing into public perception, et cetera.
And the off-season changes should be factored into the point spread. That's what the program counts on.
Right. But I mean, how does that work? In other words, let's take an obvious example. We had the New York Jets and now they've got Aaron Rodgers. How do you determine the value of Aaron Rodgers to the Jets compared to prior season?
Well, I mean, obviously, Aaron Rodgers was a big asset to a team over Zach Wilson. So there's going to be more people supporting the Jets. And I mean, that was a crazy game that was played. Buffalo, in all rights, should have won that game if it wasn't for Josh Allen's turnovers. But not only did Buffalo not win the game, I mean, the Jets, came out on top, even minus Aaron Rodgers. So,
yeah. By the way, I have to. I love the ESPN show Bad Beats, which most people listening and watching probably are aware of it. I feel like I had the original idea on this, having been a sports bettor for so long, and before television started following point spreads, they would kind of, Al Michaels would make some vague reference to the over-under, and nobody wanted to talk about the point spread and this and that. And now people, ESPN's got a whole show about the point spread. But
right.
Being a sports bettor, I always thought it was funny, like, these last-minute touchdowns that nobody cared about. But if you had money on the game, so that touchdown in overtime, instead of that game winning on a field goal, it winning on a punt return touchdown screwed me. Now, I'm curious if you can guess how that screwed me, because it's kind of unique.
Again, I try to focus on just the sides of the game. I don't pay much attention to totals. I don't pay much attention to halftime wagers or
well, you just hit on it right there, because this was a halftime total wager.
Right.
It was over under 20 in the second half, and it was covered all the which way, except for Buffalo hits it off the goalpost for that field goal that sends it in overtime. Otherwise, I would have won if it doesn't doink the right direction. Then I'm in overtime, and all I need is a field goal victory, which is the way it normally happens. And once Buffalo doesn't score a touchdown, I'm in good shape. Now all I need is, somebody to kick the field goal to win the game. And the damn guy, I figured he was going to be tackled at the 10-yard line, and instead he goes into the end zone. The only way I could have lost my halftime bet, and I lost it.
And that happens. But Pittsburgh definitely was a dud.
Okay, let's talk about the next one, which was Houston. Remind me what the point spread was in that game.
Houston was plus 9.5 in that game against Baltimore. Houston played a tight first half. It unfolded the way I expected, at least through the first half. And then Baltimore got it together in the third quarter and took a commanding lead. But it came down to the fourth quarter where Baltimore was content to run the ball and eat clock. Houston had 2 possessions in the last 9+ minutes of the game to score a consolation touchdown and get the backdoor cover. A lot of times that happens. I win a lot of games that way when you're taking that many points. Houston was just unable to execute and get that touchdown.
Mm-hmm. So, and what was it? How come the algorithm was pointing to Houston in that game?
Just the data that's fed into it. I can't really say much about it beyond that. But it just showed value in Houston with 9.5 points.
Mm-hmm. By the way, you mentioned them just having 2 possessions at the end. It seems to me, certainly compared to 20 years ago, the total number of plays and the total number of possessions in an NFL game just seem lower than ever. I mean, you'll see a half where a team gets a grand total of 4 possessions in a half. I mean, they're just running the clock like crazy. I mean, have you noticed that? And does this impact your thinking in any way?
Well, it doesn't really impact my thinking. It does impact the game because it speeds the game up. Um, the college has done the same thing this year, where they no longer stop the clock on first downs. College games we're going over 3.5 hours, and we live in this ADD society now, where we want things to happen. We want them to be exciting while they happen, but we don't want them to happen too long.
Well, but what I'm convinced of, if you look at, well, gee, what has changed between now and 10, 15 years ago? What's changed is the replay, that they are replaying plays, and there doesn't seem to be any time constraint to how long the darn replay is going to be. My theory is like, look, overturn it if it's obvious. If you can watch it quickly and obviously they screwed up, then overturn it and be done with it like they would in, say, tennis. But if you got to look at the damn thing for 5 minutes, that means it's so close that, you know what, let it go with the guy. So what we're doing is we're spending more time watching replays instead of new plays. That's what's taking up all the time, and that's why they keep having to cut down on the number of plays.
Well, this is true. Replays and challenges are definitely slowing down the game. I liked what John Madden used to say. If there was a loose ball, a ball on the turf, or did the guy catch it? Was he down before he fumbled the ball? Hey, whoever comes out of the pile with the ball, he's got it. That's who should get the ball. Simple as that.
Exactly. And there used to always be an understanding that, breaks go both ways. It's very rare for a bad call to be the decider of a game, because there's good calls and bad calls throughout a game. So yeah, I'm really annoyed by it. I think replay can be great when it enhances the game, but I think that in football right now, it's detracting from the game, if you ask me.
I agree with that. But again, yeah, everybody's under a time constraint now. We're busy.
Yeah, except when it comes to replays. We have no time constraint on replays. All right, let's talk about the last game before we get a break, because things turned nicely for us in the late game, where you had the Rams, a underdog on the road, and they covered. They not only covered, sorry, they won outright.
Yeah, that game really fit the profile of what I normally have on a weekly basis, because you have a Ram team that was just pathetic last year. You got a coach that's half in, half out, didn't know if he was coming back. Aaron Donald even thought about retiring. What's Matt Stafford have left in the tank? You got an injured Cooper Kupp. I mean, where else you going to go with this team? And then you got a Seattle team that has this rejuvenated Geno Smith, who set passing records last year. And I don't think anybody really gave the Rams much of a chance of going into Seattle and winning that game, but I did.
So you're pointing out all the public perception that was pro Seattle and anti Rams, which would lead to an incorrect line potentially. Is that basically what you're saying?
Yes, and that's what my whole system / algorithm is based on, is going against public perception of a game. I still think I could have very easily ended up 2-1 last week, but I didn't. I ended up 1-2, and it won't be the first week I end up 1-2. I may have 3 or 4 more weeks of 1.
But I'm a little confused about algorithm versus your personal analysis, because you just rattled off a bunch of public perception things pertaining to Rams players and Seattle players, but that doesn't sound like something that comes from an algorithm.
It doesn't. The program is what the program is. I can like it, I can not like it. It doesn't matter. That's what I'm giving out. That's what history has shown me to be successful. That's what's given me the edge all these years. I do that for the sake of maybe trying to make myself feel better or trying to make my customers feel better, but it really has no impact at all on
Hmm.
the algorithm or the program itself.
Right. You're saying that arguably the algorithm is working because it picked the Rams, and in fact, the Rams, there was this kind of false public perception about the Rams in Seattle.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, let's take our break. And you have promised our audience, because you went 1-2 this past week, that you're going to hand out 3 picks, and you already got them ready. So let's get to those after the break. We're talking to Richard Frazier of Frazier Wins on Double Down with Breslo. We'll be right back.
Girl, you know it's been way too long. I got to get back in my zone. Hey. 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 All right. Come on. Come on. 3, 2, 1. You know I'm feeling too good to be cooped up. Hey, ladies, don't we look good? We came to have a good time, baby. I'm feeling too good to be cooped up. Me and all of my girls, we gon' tear it up.
We give game day a whole new meaning.
Good news, though, since the first 2 games lost in the morning, I then put an extra $100 on the Rams, so I ended up breaking even on your picks. So I can't complain because I got healthy on the Rams. But how do you feel about your players playing a 3-team parlay versus 3 straight bets?
This has been brought to my attention by some of your prior guests, actually, that I'm friends with. People have talked about, should I do a 3-team parlay? Should I do round robin with these games? And I can go back and look at my historical results, and I can find reasons to say, well, this season, yeah, it would have been better to do a 3-team parlay, or this season it would have been better to do round robin with all 3 games. But I try not to complicate it like that. I just bet the 3 games individually, and that's the way I roll with it. So my advice to people is that regardless of the 1 and 2 in the first week of the season, there's 18 weeks in the season. So I say, pick your unit value, manage your money carefully, and the thing that I will give you is more winners than losers. Now, what you do with that information and how you manipulate it, whether it's into parlays or round robins or teasers or whatever, I don't know. I can't control that, and I can't guarantee you'll end up on the plus side of things.
Yeah, I think it probably should work out roughly the same in the end. I don't know. I know if I'm playing blackjack in Vegas, I tend to up my bet if I'm winning, and then not up your bet or go back to your base bet if you're losing. And that's a typical betting strategy that I think, to the extent people recommend playing blackjack, that's not a bad strategy. That, when you got a lucky streak going your way, be upping your bet and then ride out a losing streak by keeping it at your base bet. And a parlay is sort of the same thing, that, hey, I have a win, I'm going to hit a streak here, and so I'm going to double down and then double down again, which is what a parlay is basically doing.
Yes.
Yeah. So, okay, let's talk about next weekend. And first, just give me a little bit of background of your algorithm and how you say it builds throughout the year and it's self-correcting. So obviously you've now plugged in week 1 information. How is that information weighed compared to last year's information, for instance?
Well, public perception is usually based on your most recent memories. And so, what is the most recent memory of the games that we're looking at coming into this week? Well, it's last week's games now. Prior to week 1, it was just what happened last year, or maybe what transpired in the preseason. But yeah, now that we're in week 2, everybody's looking at, hey, look what this team did in week 1.
Right.
They're good. I like them, and it's a favorable matchup. So
that's obviously impacting the lines tremendously. In other words, if there was preseason lines for week 2, because there certainly was lines for week 1 going back a couple months, right?
Yeah.
If there was lines for week 2, those would be substantially different today, or substantially adjusted because of what just happened on week 1. I mean, the Giants getting smoked. What were they to the Cowboys? Was it 40-0 or 30-0?
40-0. Yes.
Right. So I'm certainly would be looking to bet against the Giants this week, but Frazier wins is probably going to tell me to bet the Giants.
Well, interesting. You should bring that game up. That's not the first game in my repertoire I was going to bring up, but the first game I was going to talk about is the Ravens at the Bengals, and the Ravens obviously were my nemesis last week, but I like the Ravens this week, and initially the early money agrees with me. I think that some of the smarter money that coming in after me will disagree, which I hope they do, because right now you can grab the Ravens plus 3.5.
And by the way, has that moved since the first release?
It's slowly moving. It opened at 3.5. What they've done so far is they've adjusted the money. Now you can you can take Baltimore plus 3.5, but you have to lay $1.15 or $1.20 to get that extra half point. But I would be really shocked if that game doesn't end up on 3. I don't see it going below 3 because the book itself would be jeopardizing itself for risk of a 3-point middle on that game, where the book could lose both sides of it. So,
I'm the epitome of the dumb public. So my initial leaning on that game would have been to take the Bengals, because Ravens are coming off of a big win. Bengals coming off of a loss, on the road, going to be their first home game, and they're going to want to make up for that. So that would be my superficial dumb public analysis.
Well, good. I'm glad you have that opinion. I'm hoping more people have that opinion. Because that will help more people get that 3.5. But I see in just the day and a half or whatever since these games have been played, that the initial money right off the bat came in on Baltimore because of their win over Houston. I probably more so Cincinnati's lack of effort versus Cleveland. I think people have questions about Joe Burrow, but again, I think people are going to come to their senses like you and say, hey, this is a team that was in the AFC Championship game last year. Joe Burrow.
Why would anybody have a question about Joe Burrow? I mean, he just seems to be a superstar.
I don't know. Maybe it's because he plays for the Bungles.
But they haven't been the Bungles of late.
No, they haven't. Joe Burrow is a fantastic quarterback. He's not the most nimble guy in the pocket, but for whatever the reason, Cincinnati's just a hard team to like. I don't know. Again, it's a public perception, but yeah, I'm telling people to go with Baltimore in that game.
All right, what's the next one?
Okay, the next one is the one you just mentioned. I'm taking the Cardinals at home versus the Giants.
What's the line?
The line on that is 5.5. The Cardinals are plus 5.5 right now. That started at 5.
Whoa! Arizona's at home.
Yes.
To the New York Giants.
Yes.
The Giants are favored?
Giants are favored.
Wow. And by the way, you can probably tell I watch all the games, but I don't focus on it that much. So I don't understand these teams well enough to know why Arizona would be an underdog to the Giants.
Well, Arizona has not been a very good team of the last few years, and this season they're without their top QB, Kyler Murray. He's on the PUP list, which means God knows when he'll play.
Who's their quarterback?
Yeah, he's their quarterback.
No. Who's taking his place?
I don't even know who their quarterback is. If it's not Kyler Murray, it really doesn't matter. It's whoever's next in line. But I think that what the program is telling me, the Giants' problems may be for real. They were absolutely horrendous Sunday night. I don't know
And
how much.
remind me who their quarterback is.
Daniel Jones.
Okay. Yeah. He hasn't
And
been strong.
he was pathetic. Every time he had the ball, he either got sacked or he turned it over, he fumbled. Um, but I think that the perception of Giants being a pretty good team last year, straight up and against the spread, is going to give some credibility to the Cardinals plus 5.5 being a pretty good bet.
Yeah. Well, and they didn't get killed. They were at Washington, weren't they? And they didn't get killed.
No, it was a very close game. It could have went either way. Granted, Washington isn't that great of a team either, but yeah, I just again, I'm justifying what the program is telling me.
Okay. All right. And what's the third one?
The third one is an interesting one. It is the Sunday night game. I am taking the Patriots at home +2 against the Miami Dolphins.
Okay. So both teams coming off a loss, right?
Miami won.
No, I thought Miami. Wait, they played the Chargers, didn't they?
Yes, Miami.
Oh, they beat the Chargers.
They beat the Chargers.
Oh, I don't know why I thought the Chargers won that game. Okay, so Miami went on the road to LA and won. Now they're going on the road second week in a row to New England. New England coming off a loss, right?
Yeah, New England's coming off a loss, but New England played Philadelphia, who was in the Super Bowl. New England had a chance to win that game. They didn't. They fell short and they failed to cover. But if Mac Jones was able to do anything there in the end of that game, he could have pulled the upset.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I mean, for Miami to go on the road to the West Coast and then the Northeast, win back-to-back games, that would be surprising, right?
yeah, it would. Miami, of course. Now that everybody sees how Tua can play when he's healthy, and the combination of him throwing to Tyreek Hill, they were lethal in that game last week. But again, the algorithm says that there's value in the Patriots in that game.
Now, I think I can point out a trend here. Of your 6 picks, all 6 have been dogs.
Yes, primarily I am on dogs. I found there to be more value in dogs. I will occasionally have a favorite. They usually won't be a big favorite. The risk you run in playing big favorites is that they could have a 2-score lead and just fall into a prevent defense, and they run the risk of losing the cover by a backdoor touchdown that means nothing in the overall scope of the game.
How do you feel about people taking, since you do bet dogs, people taking the money line on your picks?
Well, it's a question similar to should you parlay or should you round robin or should you tease them. There are people that have stats out there that say that if an underdog covers a game, they win the game outright 80% of the time. Again, I don't have hard data on this knowledge, so I like taking the points. I view that as insurance, and so I always take the points regardless.
All right. So since this is a business show, in light of the fact that you went 1-2 the first week, what do you do from a business perspective as you're trying to bring in more customers?
Well, I mean, like I said, I'm going to go 1-2, and I'm going to have other 1-2 weeks during the course of the year.
But what I mean is you're giving out these picks for free to my listeners. Are you also giving them out for free on your website to everyone?
I am. I want people to operate with house money. I want to put people on the plus side of things before I start asking for anything in return. So I will continue to give these out for free until I get people on the winning side.
Yeah, makes sense. Last question. Is it called Two for the Money? Is that the movie with Al Pacino and
Correct.
McConaughey? A little bird told me that you are portrayed in that movie by Matthew McConaughey, which was the perfect actor for you, by the way. I mean, you know, the looks and everything. Any truth to any part of that movie being based upon you?
There is some truth to that. I don't want to go into a lot of details about that, but yeah, when that movie first came out, I felt like that somebody had ripped this out from under me and capitalized on it without giving me any credit. But with that being said, good for the people involved, and I know the people that were involved in it and where the story came from, and so.
So it obviously it's a fictional movie, but it's based on some real stuff. And
there is some factual based information in there.
And some of that comes from you and some of it from other places.
Yeah, I think that the majority of it was taken from my success, and then they just kind of built storylines around that to enhance it for movie production qualities. But
right, like being a former college quarterback.
I wasn't.
That's not you.
Yeah, I wasn't a former college quarterback, but I was.
You were the kicker, right?
Yeah, I was a soccer player. Yeah.
Oh, you were a soccer player. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Anyway, yeah, I rewatched that movie. I noticed I always check Rotten Tomatoes before I watch any movie because I pretty much trust Rotten Tomatoes. And the reviews are not great on Rotten Tomatoes for that, but maybe you got to be a sports bettor or something. But I found it, I hadn't seen it in a long time, but I rewatched it. I found it highly entertaining, and my wife watched it too, and she liked it too.
Well, good. I'm glad you enjoyed part of my story.
Well, there's a particular part of the movie where he's involved in a threesome. I certainly hope that was ripped from a page of your life, my friend.
No comment.
No comment. Frazier wins, FrazWins.com. Check it out. Very generous of Richard with his time and to come on despite going 1-2 this past weekend. But I have a strong feeling he's going to turn it around this weekend. Appreciate you giving free picks to all of our listeners, and we'll certainly report on it next week.
Thank you very much, Jim.
All right, Richard. Take care, and thank you, everyone, for watching and listening to Double Down with Breslo. We'll be back soon with another episode. Take care.
I want you to smash that like button.